And I thought, oh, it's so sad. I get what she's saying, but it still hurts when you lose a child like that.
Of
And you
course.
have those memories. Even when that happens enough that you're used to it, it still hurts. And so if we can do anything to keep that, even from losing one baby, it's worth it.
Hello, and welcome to Healing Trauma Mamas. I'm your host, Madon Wingo. Thank you for joining us as we share in our stories and experiences of healing from childhood traumas and birth traumas. Listen as we discuss our struggles, our failures, our strengths, and our victories, and all those lessons we've learned along the way. Why, hello, Healing Trauma Mamas. Welcome back to the podcast today. I'm so glad you decided to join us and listen in for another great story today. I'm very excited about the guest that I'm having on today, since that she's a dear friend of mine. Gail is joining us today, and she is a midwifery student right now, just in her primary. She's getting so close to graduating, and she's been in birth work for a very long time. And she's going to tell us about a love project that she had really been God put on her heart a long time ago, and got to see it come to fruition. And she's got some amazing things to share with us. And Gail, would you like to introduce yourself? Maybe include a little bit more with that.
Sure. I am a grandma now that has decided to go back and get her midwifery degree. So I have always been interested in birth, but stayed home and homeschooled my children. And once they were older, I did some other things that were um, not really birth related, but more medical related. I ended up teaching other homeschool kids science, including biology and anatomy and physiology, and that um, kind of um, struck a fire in under me, I guess you'd say, at that point where I thought, well, what am I going to do once my children are grown and I have time, a real time, which I don't really, but now, then I thought I did. And so I thought, well, maybe I might get into the birth world. And actually, my oldest daughter had her first baby, and she had a doula, and I found it to be so incredible watching what her doula did with her. And so I had uh, time after the birth where I just kept thinking about it. And then my daughter said to me one day, "Hey, I am really interested in being a doula, and I want you to do it with me." And I thought, yeah, I want to do that. How cool is that? To not only to do something I find so fascinating and such an incredible career, but to do it with my daughter. That was really neat. So we went to training together and became doulas, and we worked together quite a few times with clients that had really long labors or when her baby was younger. And then she had her second baby. We would go together so that I could keep her baby while she took care of the client. And then she would come nurse the baby and I would go take care of the client. And that was a lot of fun. We enjoyed that.
What a cool team. I
Yeah, it
love
was nice.
that. So when clients hired you guys, did they hire you as a mom-daughter duo, like the doulas?
Yes, our name was All in the Nest doulas. And
Oh,
so so they knew that there were two of us. They knew we backed each other up. Generally they hired one or the other of us, but there were situations that we ended up going together. Like one time one time there was just this mom and we both knew her really well. It was a friend of ours, and she was a first time mom, and it was just really long. And so we went together for that. And then another time we had a surrogate mom, and we were both just so fascinated and really fell in love with her that we both went to support her. So we did go together sometimes, but other times we had most of the time we had our own clients. So it worked out well.
well, how fun.
Yeah. So eventually, after she had her second baby, a while into that, she was like, I just can't do this anymore. So it became, me on my own. But I started working with some of the same midwives over and over again. And as, their clients' doula. And Um, they were so encouraging to me of, Gail, you really should be a midwife. You really, and I never really said it to anybody because I thought, oh, I'm not sure at this point in my life that I could do that. I really didn't think that I could do it. I just didn't see myself being as capable as I guess other people saw me. And so I think God just really worked on my heart and said, no, this is the calling I had for you. And he used people to tell me that. So that was really cool.
Mm.
Um, so finally I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I can do it. And I want to do it. And then I really, like I said, felt like God was calling me to do this. I have a shirt, probably all of us as midwives say, have a shirt that says that midwifery is a calling or what an incredible calling or something like that, because it is. It's not something called that everybody is called to do. Um, so yeah, I started school, gosh, over 3 years ago now. So I'm definitely at the very end. I'm hoping to be done by the end of this year. But
Yay.
um, yeah, yay. And yeah, I've surprised myself with what I've been able to accomplish and I'm finished with my apprenticeship. And it's just been amazing. I worked with three incredible preceptors that have taught me so much and really honored that they invested in me. So yeah, I feel like I'm ready or getting ready. Yeah, at the moment, I do. Maybe once I'm licensed, I'm maybe scared to death. I don't know, but right now, I feel good about it. So,
I think you'll have some confidence because
it, it,
getting to work with three midwives throughout your preceptorship is wonderful because you're gaining so much from each one because everybody has their different strengths and everyone teaches a little bit differently. And so you're getting a really nicely rounded education.
yeah, definitely, definitely, because they all did things different, and some were more medical, some were more, natural minded with herbs and homeopathy, and um, so the the education that I got between all of them was just really great. And I worked at a birth center also with nurse midwives, so I learned a lot of things that about how what would happen at the hospital. I could see it as a doula, but to hear it from these nurse midwives was, fascinating to me. And what you just kind of learned a little bit of insight as to
Yeah.
hospital, the way
Yeah, for
hospitals do
sure.
things. So it was really great. So I continued to be a doula for that first year, but um, as I got more into my apprenticeship, I really had to stop doing that. And I missed it a lot. And I probably will always incorporate some of the things that I did as a doula as a midwife. But it is different. You have to change hats. You have to start thinking more about how this woman is really doing as opposed to how she is feeling and how to support her. So it did take me a while to change the mindset. So I did have to stop after a while so that I could gain more of the midwife mindset. So
I think that makes perfect sense. I remember that that was something that I struggled with in the beginning as well, because the midwife I was working with, she was like, "You're gonna have to figure out how to take off that doula hat, Madon."
yeah, yep,
Because you're so used to attending to the comfort and the needs of the mom.
hmm
And that's in labor, especially, that's what you're in tune to, and really having to switch to a more clinical mindset.
hmm
It does take some time, and I completely understand what you're saying. Like, you kind of have to step back from doing any of those doula roles because it's just a little too difficult, because then you end up being the doula that's trying to tell the midwife what to do because you're seeing things differently.
yeah, that's true.
or or you're so upset at the doctor.
Yeah, that's true, true. Well, and
Yeah,
it's still, if we transfer people, we go kind of in a doula role,
right.
but it's more. We have so much more education as a
Yeah,
midwife about the medical side that there's more we can offer if we did have when we do have transfers. So
yeah,
it
for
is very
sure.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So you stopped doing doula stuff mostly.
yeah, I did teach. I have been teaching for the last, I think, 5 years, teaching childbirth education, breastfeeding support, newborn care, and postpartum care. Those are my 4 areas that I teach. So I usually have ongoing classes every month here locally at a birth center. And so it's evolved also, the what I teach and how I teach the material itself. I tend to pick up what I've learned in school, and some of the things that I had in my original curriculum is now kind of replaced a little bit because it was more for anybody having a birth that was either hospital or out of hospital. But now almost all of my clients that I teach are out of hospital. So there's a lot of things that I've changed in that. But I still love teaching. I enjoy
Mm.
my classes and I love getting to meet people. They're not my clients, they're other people's clients. And so I can really encourage them. And then I keep up with them through those midwives. How did so and so's birth go? And different things like, ask different questions about them. So that's been really good. I've enjoyed
Oh
that.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Um, and then, so that's a little bit about me. And then I think we were going to talk a little bit about something near and dear to my heart was a
Yes.
ministry that I've been involved with for a few years called Eden Ministry, and it's out of Uganda. Um, and it's through my church. That's how I found it initially. And then, and it's still, I'm going through my church, but I've connected with them on a different, in a different level. I have just become such great friends with the people in the ministry, and I just have fallen in love with them. But let's see, in 2019, I think the fall of 2019, I had heard about this trip and that they were starting it, and it was specifically for women's health care, and more specifically, even it was about midwifery. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. I want to be a part of that team. And I knew I wasn't going to be a midwife yet, but I asked the pastor that was over our missions, can I still go even if I'm not licensed? And he was like, absolutely. We need people to go and care for these women. And, it'll be a team. So you could just go and do what you know at that point. So the trip was planned for the fall of 2020, and then COVID
Oh,
hit. So I was so excited about that trip and looking forward to it. And then obviously it got canceled. And actually, I think halfway through the year, I was still thinking COVID's going to go away and I'm going to be able to still go on this trip. So it was probably July before I realized it's not going away and this trip is now
mm,
being canceled. So it just broke my heart. I was so excited about it.
for
So
sure.
didn't get to go that year, and then they didn't schedule it again the next year, um, or the next year. But they finally got it rescheduled for 2022. And I found out about it probably 10 months or so before. Um, and the pastor started talking to me about it. And there was another midwife a new midwife at our church that also was going to go. So we started talking about it. We got really excited about it. And um, and that one actually happened. It was my
Yay.
first time to go. Yeah, it was amazing. And so that trip really changed my life. I've done mission trips all my life. I've gone on many, many mission trips. And I always thought when I first started my midwifery journey, I used to think, oh, I'm going to really try to do mission trips and give back. That was my dream. But now it's a very specific dream because I feel like that's what God's put on my heart. Um, so we went to Uganda last year. Really got to spend time with the ministry leaders, which is pastor and his wife and their 4 kids. They're the ministry leaders, and really his extended family all really work for this ministry as well because people stay in their home when they go there, and they feed us while we're there, and it's a whole family event for them that taking care of us when we come. So, but we are able to do so much in such a short amount of time. So it is definitely a maternal outreach that we did while we were there. And we went to last year. 5 different small little community health centers, and they label them as levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a level 5 is a maternity hospital, and then there's a regular hospital. So that's kind of the hierarchy of their medical care in Uganda.
So
And
can
I
you
was able,
explain? I'm
huh?
sorry to interrupt you,
No, go
Gail,
ahead.
but I
No.
just was thinking for the listeners and for myself as well. Can you explain a little bit about maybe why Uganda is needing some help, why they're needing midwives to come in and help and work on their midwives training? Because is there some, like, when they become midwives there, is there just training just so like minimal, or what is going on there that they're needing so much help with this type of care and maternity care?
It's a very poor area where we're going. It's pretty far from the capital. It's very poor. They don't have a lot of vehicles. They have a lot of motorcycles, but which they will put 3 or 4 people on at a time, including babies and mamas sitting sideways in the back. And it's always crazy to watch that. But it's very poor. So it's a mountainous area, and so to get to some of the areas where some of the women live, it is remote, very remote. And so the clinics that they have, the health centers, usually will have 1 or 2 midwives that have been trained for that region. And then they'll spend time working at different health centers. And women just don't go for prenatal care there. They work all the time. They don't understand the importance of prenatal care. So their maternal and infant mortality rate is extremely high. And they just need to be taught that it is important, and explained why is it important to
Mm.
get prenatal care. So trying to change that fabric of thinking, I guess, is what we want. And really, the leader of that ministry, um, is it okay if I just say their names?
That's fine with me.
Yeah, Pastor Kenneth is his name, and his wife is Abigail, and they're just phenomenal people. And Pastor Kenneth had this dream of a maternal outreach since he was a boy, and his mother lost a baby. Um, Actually, I don't think she lost the baby, but she almost did. And she didn't have a way to get to the hospital, and he had to walk her miles to get to the closest health
Wow.
clinic. It was just a really difficult journey, and there were problems and along the way. And I think she actually, honestly, I can't remember if she lost the baby or not, but it was a really traumatic memory for him. And so he felt like God that had that he wanted him to have this ministry as part of Eden Ministry, which is an outreach also to husbands and wives, and just a family ministry altogether. But he wanted to do the maternal outreach within his ministry. So that's how it began.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and it is awesome. And I um after being there and understanding more about what their healthcare is like there, I can now understand. I can see, their needs so much better because, well, let me explain how the classes got started. So when we went in 2022, we went to 5 different um, levels, 5 different places within the mountain. So we would drive sometimes an hour to get up into the mountain, and it was pretty remote, but there were so many women there that would come. They came because it was advertised. I don't know how exactly, but they were told that if they came for prenatal care, they could get this required mama baby kit that they needed for a birth. They don't do home births in Uganda, so they have to come into the health center to have their babies. And in order to have their babies at the health center, they have to have this mama baby kit, which is really basic. It consisted of like a sheet to go over the plastic sheet to go over the bed, to the like forceps and scissors and a cord to tie the baby's cord, um, an umbilical cord. And then I can't remember. There was like seven things in it, really basic things, a bar of soap, um, just really basic things. But it was, I think it cost like $9 to buy those. And so our church ended up buying all those. But for them, that was a lot of money. And so they came a long way to come to prenatal care so that they could get their mama kit. And here was the thing, they came and the midwives from America were there to see them, which they felt like that was a great thing. They really wanted to come see us, and which was an honor to me to learn that they felt that made them happy that we were there, that we took our time and we came there. But it was an honor to me. So, but when they came, we saw them and we palpated their bellies and we measured them and we listened. We took our Dopplers and we listened to their heartbeat, which they had never heard before because they use Penards there. And it was just so exciting to watch their faces and to see how they responded to us being there. And then once they saw us, they went out to a tent and they had a prayer ministry and they were prayed for there. So, after that, then they were given their mama baby kids. So that first year we went, we saw 900 and I want to say 73 women that week between the five of us. There was four that we took and then somebody that was there that went with us, an American missionary that went with us also. And we palpated all of those bellies that week. And there were, I think, 60 something salvations for the week. And it was such an incredible experience. And you know how when you have an incredible experience, you leave it and you stay on this little high for a while of, oh, it was so great, it was life changing, like camp
Mm-hmm.
or any mission trip is that way.
Some births
And
sometimes are that
oh,
way. You're
yes,
on a high
exactly. You're on a
afterwards for a
high.
while. Like that was just so miraculous.
It's true. Yeah, yeah. And you take things with you from those experiences. But
For
usually you
sure.
kind of get back to normal. You remember those experiences, but you get back home and you get back to some normalcy in your life. But I didn't. I couldn't get Uganda out of my mind. I just kept thinking about it every day. The women that were there, the circumstances, how good it felt just to love on them and be a part of that ministry. And so while I was there, I had mentioned to Pastor Kenneth, about some things that we saw that I felt like could be improved so much. Not to try to compare the way they birth there and the way we birth here, because really the problems that they had mostly came from Western influence.
Mm-hmm.
So when they would birth there, they would they would come in, they would uh, they would walk miles to get to the health center sometimes, and then they would make them lay down flat on their backs until they gave birth and push the baby out that way. And so I had commented about, it's really not the best way to birth, and I wish that they could learn. I wish they had not been given that Western influence, because in the
Yeah.
United States, obviously 80% of women have epidurals. So, even then it's not the best way to birth, but that's what we do. But they
So
don't
they
have
don't
pain
have,
medication.
I was
Mm-mm.
wondering if they had
Yeah,
any.
nothing, no pain medication at
Mm.
all. The only time they would get an epidural is if they're about to have a C-section.
Okay.
So it is different for them. So they're all unmedicated births. They don't really have an option.
Mm.
So noticing some of the things that were done there, we just kind of started talking about it one night after after a maternal outreach. And Pastor Kenneth really listened and he said, well, how could we do that? How could we teach them? How could we change things? And I said, I don't know, it'd be nice if we could do a training with the midwives. And I think that'd be really great. And he said, yeah, that would be great. And so that was just a real simple conversation that happened that night. And over the next few months, Kenneth and I had sent messages back and forth and with our missions pastor, and kind of talked about what that would look like. How could we make that work? And it just kind of um, stayed in my mind for a long time. And so he said at some point in the winter last year, would you be able to come a week early and do a training? And I went, yes, I can make that work. I can do it. I could
Nice.
just plan it now. And so I talked to my preceptor and I said, okay, I don't know what next year is going to look like, but in October, I need to be off for 2 weeks. And she was like, okay, absolutely. Well, then I got two clients in October and I'm thinking, oh no, what's going to happen? And I kind of told them ahead of time, I'm supposed to go to Uganda, but they haven't told me when. There's a joke, and anytime you go to Africa, that you do things on African time, and it's
Mm-hmm.
true. You hurry up and try to make plans, but then really nothing happened till the last minute. Nothing was truly pinned down. I I kept saying, Kenneth, I have to plan this because I have clients now that are due. I have to know things over 9 months ahead of time, and that's hard for them. But as it turned out, they ended up having to move it. Just so happens that they had to move the trip up a month this time to the last week of August and the first week in September, in which I didn't have anybody do those 2 weeks. Isn't that cool?
Nice. That's
It just,
amazing.
God just cleared my schedule because he knew it. And the reason they had to move it up was because the Ugandan government, the ministry, health ministry, was going to come in and be a part of our training. They wanted to be a part of it and help us. And I was like, what? Oh my gosh, that's incredible. So, so we kept brainstorming about the training, and I started asking other midwives, hey, at my church, hey, we're doing this. Are you interested? And two that went last year came back and
Can
went
we
with us. Well,
just pause for a moment just for the fact that you keep saying other midwives at my church?
uh-huh.
I'm not really sure how many other midwives have other midwives at their church. I just think that's just, it blows my mind for a moment just to think, like, oh, I went and talked to the other midwives at my church. Yeah, we all gathered up. How did that happen?
So I do have a big church. I go to a big church, and there are a couple of midwives. One is a nurse midwife in a hospital, and I didn't really talk to her, although I might talk to her next year. Um, Another one was a nurse midwife that now has a home practice that I've known her for years, and so we're friends. Another one was actually a labor and delivery nurse. So I called her a midwife, but she went in a midwife role, but she's a labor and delivery nurse. So she's not exactly a midwife. But the fourth woman that went with us this year actually is a midwife that I have known. So it's kind of funny, but back last winter, I saw her in the atrium, the church atrium, and I started talking to her. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, I know her from church. And then she asked me something about midwifery. And I thought, wait a minute. I know her from my midwife world. She had just
The
started
two
coming to
worlds
our church.
collided.
My two worlds overlapped there. And it took me a minute to think that through. And then I laughed about it later. But we started doing a ministry together at our church. And it wasn't until, I don't know, we talked several times, a month or a couple of months, I guess, probably in January. I said to her, hey, I do this mission trip to Uganda, and um, that is a midwifery mission trip. And I said, would you be interested in going? And she went, what? She just was so surprised that I'd asked her, and she was like, "Why'd you ask me?" And I said, "Well, because you're a midwife, and because God told me to ask you. I just felt like He just led me to her." And she's been a midwife for 18 years, so I knew her from the community, but not really that well until she started going to my church. So, but I felt like God just said, "Go ask her." And so it was kind of funny because I don't think she would mind me telling this story, but she had a pretty difficult birth back in the a few months before that, and it had to do with breech. And um, I'll come back to the breech story in just a minute. But one of the main things I wanted to teach was breech, and
Mhm.
she was like, "Oh no, no, no! God and I've decided we're not doing any more breech. I'm not going to." I'm not going to train on breech. And I knew she had done a lot of breech births. And I went, okay, all right. She said, I'll pray about it. So, well, I don't even think she said she'd pray about it the first time. I just think she was just like, no. And then she came back to me a couple weeks later and she asked me a few questions about it. And I told her, and she's like, okay, I'm going to pray about it, but I don't know if my husband will be on board. And so a few weeks later, she's like, is there going to be an informational meeting so that he can come? And
Nice.
so eventually there was, he was able to come see what it was all about. And yeah, that's it. She was like, yes, I'm coming. I am definitely coming. But she said that God just really kept working on her heart and said, hey, that's not the end of what I want you to do with breech. I want you to train other people. So she was a big
Nice.
part of our training with the breech. So breech part. So
That's
um,
wonderful.
so in talking about what we were going to do the training on, um, and the training, by the way, turned into such an amazing thing. Once we found out the Ugandan government was involved and that they were going to be giving certificates and kind of like CEUs that we would do. But once they're trained there, they are never required to have more training. So
Oh,
some of
wow.
these midwives have been midwives for 20 or 30 years and have never had more training other than their initial training. So we didn't want to go into it saying, "Oh, we're the American midwives," especially being a group of white women. We did not want to come in and um, at all indicate that we knew more than they did. That we were very cautious about that, and we were very aware of that we wanted to be careful of that. So we wanted it to be more of an exchange back and forth of, hey, these are things that we have seen that have worked, that can work. These are some trainings that we've done that we'd like to share with you. What can you teach us about? We don't know much about HIV because that's high risk for us. So they taught us a lot of things about what they do with the women there with HIV or malaria or things like that. So we got a lot of education as well. But so we really had to, start thinking about, okay, what are the things that they maybe haven't had training in and that we could offer? And so that was our heart when we went into this. And so, um, one of the things that happened in 2022, I met a woman that I always asked through a translator. The midwife was also our translator, the local midwife. And we had a woman that came in that told me that she had a loss 2 years before, stillborn. And so I wanted to know, why, what happened with the baby. Let's talk about it so that we could make sure that it wasn't, something that we didn't need to address and her be at the hospital for this birth. And so
Yeah.
she explained to me that she lived really remotely, way up in the mountain. And she explained to me that uh, she walked, I think, like 3 or 4 miles to get to the health center when she was in labor. It was her first baby, I think.
Mm.
And she got there and the baby was breech. They found out the baby was breech when she got there. And the midwife that was there told her they can't deliver a breech on a first time mama. Actually, I don't think they even said first time mom. I think it was they can't deliver a breech at that clinic, at that health center because it was a smaller health center. So she left. They told her you need to go to a hospital. So she left, but she didn't have transportation to a hospital. So she went home and the
Mm.
baby died. And that stuck with me. It just hurt my heart
Man.
so much. And I thought, if they knew she didn't have transportation to a hospital, they were her only option to deliver this baby. Again, it really stuck with me. So
If they'd have had the
I,
training that they
yeah,
needed and they could have helped her, then
they could have
things would
done
have been,
something.
could have, we don't know for sure, but
Right.
there might have been some possibility that they could have prevented that, not only that death, but the trauma for the mom.
Yes. Yes. And I know that people, the midwife would say, I asked her about it. How is she healing from that? How is she doing? And the midwife was pretty nonchalant about it. She's like, death is a part of our life. We don't stick with that. We just keep going. And I thought, oh, it's so sad. I get what she's saying, but it still hurts when you lose a child like that and you
Course.
have those memories. Even when that happens enough that you're used to it, it still hurts. And so if we can do anything to keep that, even from losing one baby, it's worth it. And
Hmm.
so I think that's where that whole conversation happened that night when I was in Uganda the year before, where I said, if we had some training for those midwives, a little bit of training could really help make a big difference in the mortality rate. And so that's how this other midwife kind of got involved. And she was really working through some trauma herself and felt like that this is what God was wanting her to do. So she and I led the breach part of the training this year, and it was really good. She did a great job, and I was so happy to have her there with us. So
Yeah, that's
anyway,
wonderful.
that's kind of where everything started. So our training this year, we went for 2 weeks, and the first week there were just four of us that went. And did I answered your question about the midwives? I did,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you did. That was great.
And I'm hoping this year we could take, or next year we could take other people. They don't really have to go to our church, they
Uh-huh.
don't. So
Wink, wink.
Madon,
Hint, hint.
Madon, I think you need to
I
go.
actually, ever since you have talked about Uganda before you left, when you were preparing and getting ready and everything, and I know we were praying over you and stuff, it has been very strong on my mind, and I have not got out of my mind since you got back. So
Yeah.
I even said to my family the other day, I just want you guys to kind of prepare. I am not positive yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to Uganda next year.
Oh, that's
And they all
great.
just
I
looked at
love
me,
that.
okay, mom.
That's fantastic. I love
Oh,
it.
yes. I hadn't got to
I'll
tell
be
you yet.
happy.
So there you go.
Yes, I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah, I think it's
So,
amazing work, and please tell us more about how this trip went, what you guys accomplished. I mean, you ended up teaching 70 Uganda midwives?
yes, yes. So that we weren't sure how many were coming. And honestly, 2 weeks before we left, I mean, we'd had our plane tickets and the four of
Yes.
us were, designing t-shirts that we could wear, just fun stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, because we all had I gave out something for everybody to prepare and plan to teach. And so everybody had their own segment and, we're all capable people. I wasn't going to go back and see what everybody was teaching. I'm just like, hey, you teach this. You've got an hour to teach this part. And so, but I really didn't know how long we had for the whole training. We had like four topics that we wanted to teach on, including one was breach, and then there were just a few other things. Hygiene was one, just using gloves and things like that. And then there were just some other things that we talked about teaching, but everybody had their thing. And about 2 weeks before we left, um, Pastor Kenneth, sent a message and said, "Hey, do you have any plans for where you want to teach?" And I went, well, I don't know anything about where to teach. You're going to have to
Yeah.
tell me. I just assumed we'd be in a hospital or something like that, or at the clinics themselves, the healthcare centers. And he said, well, we're expecting about 100 midwives. And I went, what? Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
We all thought that we were going to be teaching about 20 or 25 because that's how many we got to know last year. We thought we'd
Mhm.
basically get to know the ones from last year. But as it turned out, there's a lot more midwives in that district that we didn't get to meet because we were only there 1 week and they did maternal outreach for 4 weeks. So there were other people that went, other people from Uganda, the missionaries that lived there went and worked the other 3 weeks. So we were pretty shocked that we might have 80 to 100. And so then we're like, wow, okay, this changes everything. So then we kind of revamped everything we were doing and decided it's going to be a lot more of a formal training than we first expected it to be. We thought it'd be more hands on and just kind of, talking to a few of the midwives at a time. But then the Ugandan government was involved and the um, everything just kind of went to a different level. So,
Okay.
so we revamped. We came up with our curriculum really quickly. I kind of made sure everybody had exactly what they were going to talk about, and they turned in their, their training and stuff like that, so that we all had a beautiful agenda written up and things like that. So I felt a lot better about it. And it even changed a couple more times in those 2 weeks about it. Yes, we were on African time. So we were going to figure it all out. So we just packed up all of our educational supplies. We did make some gifts for them. One of the ladies, one of the labor and delivery nurse worked really hard at making little packages of gifts. And then one of the other midwives, she really it was on her heart to have t-shirts made for all the midwives. And so she did that. She paid for those t-shirts, 100 t-shirts to be made, which I thought was incredible. I think her life group
Yeah.
helped pay for those, but she got a really good deal. And I designed a really basic logo for our conference, and we gave a name to it. And it just became something much more formal than we were thinking. But we all worked together really hard at the end and got our stuff together by the
Nice.
grace of God.
Yeah, for
Because we
sure.
also all had births and appointments and everything during that time too. So
Yeah,
it
I
was a
know you were
lot.
working nonstop during that
I
time.
was, yeah. So yeah, we got all of our stuff together, and I bought measuring tapes, the small little measuring tapes that we use. They don't have them there. They use their hands. And so one of our appointments was talking about a little bit more precise measurements so that we could make sure, there was not, because they always had different midwives that were checking. So their measurements were always different. So
Mhm.
that was another one of the things that we talked about. Um, so we gave those out, and the midwives loved their gifts so much. They just were so happy with everything they got. Then, but once we got there, we felt like we weren't going to have quite as many midwives that were going to come. I think the midwives were questioning, why are we doing this? Um, this is why are we having to give up our time? And the government wasn't going to pay them for this training. But I think at the last minute, the Ministry of Health decided that they would pay them to come.
Oh, good.
So then we
Good.
went back, we ended up with 60, 70 midwives that we trained, and it was phenomenal. So we did 2 days of training twice. So that way
Wow.
that the midwives that were at the local health centers could switch up. So the government had them to come, or one, if there were two at a health center, one would come the first 2 days and the other would come the second 2 days. So there was always someone on call, which was really grateful for that. I was wondering how they were going to do it, but so the government really stepped in and provided more than we expected. So
That's wonderful. Good.
yeah, so we did these 2 day trainings, and just loved these midwives. We just loved them. And we just talked about, hey, what you're doing is hard, hard. We thought what we were doing was hard. It's harder for you guys. They don't have Dopplers. Half the time they don't have blood pressure cuffs that work, but they're required to put down blood pressure. And so even, it doesn't matter if it's automatic or manual, they're not always working. They don't always have the supplies they need. They never have enough gloves. So most of the time they're doing things without gloves, and it's just really hard for them. So we just told them, you guys are doing a phenomenal job with what you have, and we're just so appreciative of all you do, and just really loved on them. And they needed that. They really did. I mean, it's really a sacrifice there. It's really a labor of love to be a midwife there. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was great.
So
And then go ahead.
the government pays all the midwives there? So
Yes.
they're okay, they're all employed by like their health care system.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
All other hospitals, except for very few, are government-run hospitals. There are a few that are Christian, like Catholic hospitals or things like that are private,
Hmm.
but most of them are government-run, and government, they pay all the employees.
Nice.
So that second day when we finished, they had invited all the midwives to come back and get their certificate. So they printed up these beautiful certificates with the name that Kenneth and I had come up with for not only for the training itself, but for the ministry, North American Medical Mission. So we're hoping to get that name, get it, make it a nonprofit. And then in accordance with Eden Mission, and they made these beautiful certificates with the Ugandan flag on one side and the American flag on the other. And then it just said a certificate of completion. This is this to certify that blank. And they had their names printed into the certificates. Has
Hmm.
completed a 2-day training under the theme maternity care, pregnancy and birth essentials. That was the name we gave it, and is awarded the certificate on September 1st, 2023 in Uganda. And then they surprised me, but they had a blank for me to sign. It just said Gail
Oh.
Wooster, lead facilitator, which was so sweet. I just felt so honored that they wanted me to do that. And then um, I signed all of them for the women and I handed them out. And so for the ceremony, there was the ministry, the director of health with the Ministry of Health that came
Hmm.
for that region. So he came and spoke to all of them for a few minutes, which meant a lot to them. And then the Pastor Kenneth from Eden Ministries was there, and then me, and we all spoke to the women and just encouraged them and told them how grateful we were that they came, and if they had questions that we'd love to be able to help. So, and we handed out their certificates and then their T-shirts, and they were so excited. They all put their T-shirts on immediately, even over their uniforms. And then every time we saw them after that, they had their T-shirts on over their uniforms. They were
Aw,
so proud of them. So
that's
it
awesome.
was a really cool thing. So,
That's
yeah.
wonderful.
So yeah, 70 midwives we got to train and work with and learn from that week. And then, had a great weekend. And then the rest of our team came on Sunday night. And then the maternal outreach was the second week. And the maternal outreach for this year, we saw 1,017 women, had our hands on 1,017 bellies between the five of us. We had a PA that came the second week and she
Hmm.
joined us as well. So that was kind of what it looked like. And then I tried to write down all of the midwives that I met through the week. Um, Amazing midwives like midwife Centrina and midwife Justine and midwife Noreen. And they were just incredible. They not only helped translated for us, but they helped us to know, the way they do things there. And they would just tell us more information about things. Um, and just help us relate to the women in a different way because most of the women there appear to be very stoic, very um, serious. They don't really connect with their eyes and their facial expressions the way we do. So it took me that first year to realize, okay, are they bothered by this or that? But I realized this year they that's just the way they are. They're not expressive with their face. It didn't mean that they didn't really love us, being there. It was just difference in their culture. And so learning that after it was over, after really every time that a mom came in, I would ask her, "Can I hug you?" And they were all, then their face would always light up and they're like, "Yes, yes, please." And so that was
Oh,
always really cool. I love that. So,
that's awesome. That's
yeah,
amazing. Yeah,
yeah.
so you brought up a translator. In Uganda, they speak Swahili?
Actually, no. In
Okay.
the area that we're in, they have a local language that's really not documented anywhere, not translated in any way. And the first year we made our T-shirts with words in Swahili because that's what we thought. And then we got there, and Pastor Kenneth was like, "Well, they don't know Swahili. This is a local language, so it's really not something that most people would, know, or you just have to live
Wow.
here and learn it." I'm like, "Wow, I didn't know." So so it's all right. But all of the midwives have to be able to speak English because their notes are all written in English. They have to, um, they have to be able to speak English. But most women there only have a fifth grade education. So the midwives there, this is more of an elite job where, they have had to have gone all the way through school, and then they have to be able to speak English. So,
Okay.
but the women that we served did not speak. I would say maybe 2% of the women we saw spoke English. So,
Wow. Okay. So at
yeah.
least you had good translators.
Yeah, they were wonderful.
That
They were
helped a lot.
wonderful.
Oh,
We
that's
just most of the
wonderful.
time didn't have them with us, and they were busy. So sometimes they would have to jump in and do other things like dispense medication. And then because we were so busy seeing so many women, sometimes they weren't right there with us. So we use just smile at them, try to say
Yeah.
words that I knew that they didn't understand, but they understood the baby's heartbeat when they heard it on the Doppler, and so that was good, and our smiles. So,
Well, there's so much that you can convey without actual words. I remember thinking I went on a trip. We did a mission trip down to Laredo,
uh-huh.
and we were working with families that were coming over and needing just food and shelter and clothing, and then help to get to their family where they were going to. And I muy poquito español.
Yeah, me too.
Very little Spanish. And even though I tried to work on it, and I had learned some songs in Spanish, some worship songs and some hymns, I've learned in Spanish. And I go to a bilingual church, but I still don't speak Spanish. Like, I speak some Spanish words, but not much. But what was so neat is I had hesitated about bringing my little one. At the time he was, let me think, 5 6 months old,
Uh-huh.
and I had hesitated on bringing him, and even was thinking about me not going and just my husband and the older children going, but then decided, nope, we're going to do it as a family. We're going to go together. And I'm so thankful I did, because there is nothing that speaks without words to other mamas than seeing a mama. Like, so they
Yes.
they knew I was a mom. They saw my children, they saw the little one on me, and they would immediately feel like when we first we'd greet them and try to talk with them a little bit, like you could see this kind of wall up. They'd been through some
Hmm.
things, and it was kind of hardened, and then when they would realize that I had an infant on me, or, oh, this is my child, you could see that melt on their face,
Yes.
because they were just like, oh, they're a mom too. Okay, she gets it. And we did so much just using chalk and the sidewalk. Like, we would just draw different things to each other, and we would just
Uh-huh.
convey in the smile, and just a nod would make. I mean, we had so many conversations when we didn't actually speak any words to each other.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
it was just, I mean, I think that connects so much. I mean, when you're touching somebody, like you were touching their belly and you were touching their arm to do their blood pressure, and there's this
Hmm.
connection that you have with them that you don't necessarily need to speak. How many times are
Yeah.
we at a birth with a mama when we don't? I mean, we go a long time without speaking.
Yes.
Sometimes, like, there's no words even spoken at all. We just quietly do what we need to do, and then we sit back and let the mom do her thing and maybe make notes. But we don't actually, there's no sound that comes out. There's no words that are actually spoken, but there is a whole lot that is conveyed.
Yes. You're right. You're right.
Well, I am so thankful that the Lord put on your heart to really dive into that ministry, even though you had to wait for it. I bet if you just think about it, like, so you probably changed a lot from 2020 to getting to go in 2022. Like, there was a lot that happened in those 2 years.
Yes, looking back, I'm like, I wasn't prepared that first time.
Mhm.
God knew that. He put it on my heart to prepare me, but I wasn't ready. I couldn't have done anything that I did later on. And I'm still not a licensed midwife, but I am, further down the road enough that I could do basic things. And he also, really prepared me for certain things. Like both last year and this year, I was able to determine that a mama was pregnant with twins because I had that experience here. So learning from experience the experiences that I had here um, helped me to take that information there. I was able to determine when women had preeclampsia, which quite a few times we saw that. We needed to send them to the hospital. And luckily, we had transportation from that health center to get them to the hospital.
Good.
So, different things like that that I was able to do that I couldn't have done 2 years ago because I didn't have the education and the
Right.
experience behind me. So,
Yeah.
um, I feel like every moment of the training and um, every woman that we saw, it was all because God had prepared me for it and
Mm,
just was paving the way. And so it was pretty cool to be a part of God's plan like that.
that's
Like I said, I've
amazing.
done a lot of mission trips and always feel like I'm in His will, but not necessarily being such a huge part of His plan like that. So it was such an honor for me. And I know the other midwives, the other ladies that went as midwives felt the same way that they all want to go back again next year and be a part of this ministry in the future because it was just such an incredible ministry. So,
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you heeded the call that he gave you.
yeah, me
And
too. Me
yeah,
too, because there have been times in my life where I haven't listened to him as well.
yeah.
So, that's always hard too, because you're like, I don't know, God, that seems really hard. I don't think I'm going to do that, and then, he's going to keep on you to do those things. So it's better when you just go, okay, yeah,
And
I'll
listen,
do
yeah.
whatever you say, God, I'll do
Well, I
it.
remember in this time too, like so many things were changing right before you left, and so many things were kind of escalating that you weren't expecting. And I know at least I would have been like, okay, hold on, Lord, this is looking much harder than I initially thought. This is
Uh-huh.
already a hard enough thing to go across the world and go do this. And then now you're adding this, and this on it.
Yeah.
But I love that I got to see that which is I guess I should comment, like we live hours apart. We don't get to see each other very often at all. We're like 3.5 hours apart. But through technology, we get to see each other often, and I'm so thankful for that. But even when
Yeah.
when you were talking on Marco Polo many times, just about you were just like, okay, I'm not sure how the Lord's going to work this out. Okay, I'm not sure what's happening. And I do remember one time you were like, I'm this is weird because I feel like we need a missions leader on this and we don't have a missions leader. And I remember
Hmm.
saying, Gail, you're the missions leader.
Yeah,
And
it's
you were just kind
true.
of like, oh,
It's
I
it's true. I told Madon that our pastor, who's been there for like 15 years as our missions pastor, resigned. And I was like, what? What do you mean? He called me and he was like, I just want you to know that I've taken this other job. I'm going to be leaving in a week. And I'm like, no, you can't leave. I don't know what to do without you. I'm going on this trip with three other women, and I need you to be at the other end of the phone so that in case anything doesn't go right, I
am.
know who
Hmm.
to call. And he said, I will make sure you have somebody to call and everything is going to go okay. And so I, never really led a group like that before. And um just, I had to take a lot of cash with me. And I'm like, that feels weird to be four women going to, and it's a 2 full days of traveling. We flew to Istanbul, and then we flew from Istanbul down to Rwanda, and then we stayed in a little hotel for overnight. Well, the few hours we got there like at 1 in the morning, and so we slept for a few hours, and then a driver picked us up, and we drove to Uganda because that was the closest airport. So that's the traveling we had to do. So it all had to be well orchestrated. Um, luckily in this day and age, we've got phones that work just about everywhere. But yeah, and when you're doing something like this, the enemy is alive and well trying to destroy everything you're doing. So like the weeks leading up to it, I really grumbled a little, thinking, "Oh my gosh, I have so much to do in my student midwife life, and I had a lot of things to do." But you know what? It all worked out. I got everything done, and um, I felt like it made me a much better, stronger person in the end because I relied on God through all this. But when we got it, and he didn't stop, because when we got to Istanbul, one of the girls accidentally left her phone on the plane. And so we had to take off running through the airport to try to get back there, and they wouldn't let her back on. So she had to go, and it's a huge airport, and we didn't have a very long time. So I was trying to keep up with her and make sure that she got her phone, but she took off running and I lost her in the crowd. The other two ladies, I said, go to the next gate, I'll meet you there. And so I could not find this girl, and she didn't have her phone. And so I am just like starting to freak out a little, like, oh my gosh, I can't leave her here. I'm going to have to stay in Istanbul if she doesn't get on this flight, and send the other two, and they'll just have to meet us at the hotel. So I'm
Mm.
trying to think through everything. And I'm like, I am not the person for this. I'm not. and, and then God just went, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. Quit stressing. It's going to be okay. So as I was running through the airport with sweat dripping down my face, trying to hurry, um, they announced that the next plane was going to be delayed. I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh, thank you, Lord. and and then I decided, well, I can't find her. I'm going to the next gate, and I'm just going to wait for her there. And if she doesn't show up, I'm just going to stay there and put the other two women on the plane so we don't lose all the airfare. And so that's what I did. And on my walk back um, to the gate, I got a phone call from her on her phone. She's like,
Oh,
I got
awesome.
my phone. They got my phone off the plane. And so she gets to the gate and she just burst into tears. She's like,
Oh.
I didn't know what was going to happen. And she, the stress had just built up. And so it was a sweet time to remember God's got it. We just prayed together and we are like, God had it the whole time. There was no reason for us to stress, but we just needed to be reminded before we got there that this is not our mission trip. Not our mission trip, not our money. It's God's money. It's God's time. God's plan. So
And you were
once
the perfect
again,
person to be there to do it.
I, I,
Yep.
at that moment, God called me, and I did exactly what
Yeah,
he worked with me. He worked with me. So
exactly. You were the
that's
right
true.
person at the right time, perfectly where he had placed you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
It's
just
true.
want to say, awesome. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was, like I said, it was such an amazing honor. And just as we were getting ready to do this podcast, I pulled up my pictures again, and I look at them ever so often. I have them on a little electronic photo thing in my living room. I'll see those sometimes, but then other times I just sit and scroll through and I look at their beautiful faces and I remember the moments behind those pictures, and I think, oh my gosh, they're so far away from me. They're such a different culture, and yet there's one God over all of us, and He loves them so much, and He loves me so much, and it's just it's so heartwarming when I think about it that way, that He brought us all together for a purpose, and it was just amazing to be a part of. So I'm really
Yeah.
grateful.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
grateful that I know you and I got to hear all about it from you. And I think it's wonderful. And next year, when you go, you will be a licensed midwife. You will be a
I will
certified
be.
professional midwife. So
Yeah,
you'll bring even more to the table then. And I will continue praying on it. But I dare say we're going to get to go together next year.
yeah.
So
I'm
I think
very
that would be
excited about that.
amazing.
It will be. It will be. So yeah,
Yeah.
we'll
Well,
grow it. Can all be a part of it. It'll be great.
yes,
Hopefully by then it'll be a certified nonprofit in the United
that would be
States.
great. That would
Yeah,
be
yeah. We have
wonderful.
a couple of missionaries that are working on it, so
Do you
it's a
guys
little out
have,
of my league.
I know you're working on it right now. Do you guys have a website or anything set yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Again, that's I'm going to let other people
Yeah.
handle that because that is just so far from, yeah,
So if
midwifery.
there's
It's not my
anybody,
thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so thankful that you came on the podcast to share and to just hear how you're able to bring some light across the world and really just help empower other women to help them on
Uh-huh.
their journey. And if anybody is listening and they wanted to maybe donate to this project for next year, where could they reach you, Gail? What would be the best place? Should they go straight to Eden Ministries or should they go to somewhere else?
Well, for Eden Missions has their own website, and I will give that to you. I'm looking at that right now. And then if you wanted to give toward supplies for training or supplies for the money for people to actually go on the trip, that that's incredible. That would be so great. That actually could come to me or to my church, either way. So my email is gailwooster@gmail.com. Um, and and you could always, send questions or anything to me, and then I could get that sent to the right place, or at least give you information if you wanted to send it directly to the ministry site.
If you want more information, you want to reach out to Gail, just check out the show notes. I'll have links in those and reach out to me if you need to know any more information. You can't find an answer. I don't know that I'll have an answer, but I will find it for you. So I promise we'll make sure that it gets forwarded to whatever needs to be. So, Gail, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for your wonderful heart to serve and for going and doing hard things for others and for the Lord and for really being such a sweet friend. I'm so thankful the Lord purposed us to be friends.
Oh, me too.
And
Me too. And you're so welcome. I listen all the time, and I wanted to be as supportive as I could for you, but I was like, oh, I didn't really have birth trauma, so I didn't really know how I would be a part until you asked me about this. And I went, oh, this is my passion. I could definitely talk about this.
yeah.
So thank you very much for inviting me to talk about it.
Thank you for listening. May you be encouraged and strengthened by what you've heard today. Remember, you are dearly loved by your Creator, so be who He created you to be. May you go in peace, friends. Till next time, Shalom.